Okay, we're going to call the welcome to the first meeting in June. First meeting after Memorial Day. Summer is Tuesday, June 8th, work session. We start out with opportunity for citizens to comment on issues that are not on this particular agenda. And the reason why we ask you not to do that is there's an opportunity to discuss those issues while we're having that discussion here. So if you're interested, if you have anything to say on something else, we'd be glad to entertain that. If we don't see anybody moving, we'll move on to item number 3. May 1st, 2010 flood status update.
Thank you, Mayor, Board of Aldermen. Good evening. I just want to take a few minutes to go over some items to update you on just in terms of the flood response and what we've been doing since the last meeting, and maybe update a few important facts and figures related to the response. And I'll just run through this and then be glad to answer any questions you might have. As we look at our response, again, our costs in terms of dedicated hours, regular time, and overtime, just under $200,000 of our regular paid time and about $103,000 of overtime has been incurred in the response. That's a pretty stable number from what we talked about 2 weeks ago. As is the property damage to city facilities. That's just under $900,000 at $896,760, and nearly $500,000 of that is in the parks area. So the lion's share of that is coming from our parks facilities, and specifically Fieldstone and Pinkerton and some of the other parks facilities, Harlansdale as well. A couple other things to highlight for you. We have continued to provide flood debris pickup for citizens on a you call, will come basis, and that has continued. We have collected just about 1,200 tons of flood debris in this event, and we started picking up flood debris that Sunday, May 2nd, and continue to now. What I am prepared to do, though, is announce an end to that extra service in terms of additional pickup effective a week from Friday, which would be June 18th. So that gives people another week and a half to work with that and get it to the curb and let us know, and we'll take care of it. From that point forward, we'll return to a normal process for that, and so that's what I'm prepared to do there. That will mark 7 weeks of additional debris cleanup and pickup services by our solid waste department, and I want to recognize the extraordinary efforts that those folks have made to just be there and help neighborhoods in need. So I just want to recognize that, but that's what we're prepared to do, and we'll get some communication out to the community going forward tonight and the next few days to make sure everybody knows that the 18th is when we will end those additional special services we've been providing at no cost to folks in terms of flood debris. In terms of private property assessments and damages, and we spent a good deal of time talking about that at our last briefing 2 weeks ago. The numbers are not a whole lot different in terms of the total numbers. About 449 structures received damage overall, and about 85% of those are residential structures. The total dollar amount of loss we estimate on a preliminary basis is about $16.5 million. When you look at those structures, those 449 damaged structures, 393 of them were located in the 100-year floodplain. So you've got about 56 that were outside of the floodplain that received some damage, and there are a total of 929 structures located in our floodplain. So when you look at the 929 that are located in the 100-year floodplain, 393 of them received some level of damage, so around 40% received some level of damage from minor to significant. We have taken some additional measures to work with properties that have experienced that what's defined as significant damage, which is about 50% or more of damage to the structure. we have taken extra measures and really immediately after our meeting last time, 2 weeks ago, hand-delivered and to about 30 different property owners, letters that gave them a preliminary assessment that said, your property is 50% or greater damaged from our preliminary estimate. Provided them also with a GIS aerial map that showed the floodplain elevations on their parcel of property and gave them a sense of that information, and also very much opened up the lines of communication to get additional information from them that alters that assessment of 50%, be it an appraisal or a estimated cost for repair from a contractor. All those are factors that we have welcomed and asked for to be provided to us to help better clarify the state of those properties so that folks can make appropriate decisions about what they need to do. So we have continued to do that. We added maybe another 3 properties since then. So we've made contact with 34 property owners that are located in the floodplain and provided them with that additional information, specific information about their property, and that assesses that it's a 50% or greater damage. There are 3 commercial properties in that group, so you've got about 31 single-family homes that are impacted at that level. Again, we've provided information to those folks. We have a table out in the lobby tonight that is where we have it staffed by Building and Neighborhood Services staff. If people have specific property questions, we can sit down with them right there and go over their specific situation and help with any information we have now, or work with them to set up a time to look at specific needs that they may have or information they want to share with us. So we've continued to try to be a source of information and to those property owners and help them. We have had 4 of those property owners that have provided us with information that confirms that the repairs needed to return their dwelling to a pre-flood condition do not exceed 50%. So we've had 4 of those owners give us information that have taken them on the other side of that 50% standard. And we're working with them, and those residents are proceeding with repairs now. We have some others that have contacted us, and another 4 different property owners that are contemplating rebuilding their dwelling above the 100-year flood elevation, and we're working with them as well on that project. So again, we're out there meeting with them and trying to help in any way we can, and again urge anyone who's interested or has questions of whether they're on that list or what the status of their property might be to contact us at Building and Neighborhood Services and to make that request, and we will get with them. One of the things I do want to really urge people to be aware of, the deadline has been issued in terms of FEMA registration or applications. Those need to be in by Tuesday, July 6th. So if you have not registered and made application to FEMA and SBA, you have until July 6th, which is a Tuesday, to do so. And again, we urge people, when in doubt, get registered. Even if you're not sure what you'd really be able to use or how it would work, get registered. Businesses that were impacted, get registered. Even if you weren't flood damaged and you're a business that was adversely affected by the flood in some way in terms of your business operations, you are eligible to get registered and at least get in the process and see where you are. So again, our watchwords from day one have been get registered and get in the process, because you can't get this help if you let that deadline pass and don't get your application in. That covers sort of the property side.
Eric, before you go any further, for our viewing public, how long will the table out in the lobby be open this evening? Is it just during this meeting?
We'll be open through this meeting and after this meeting, between this meeting and the 7 o'clock. We'll
just for our viewing public, in case anyone want to come down.
Yeah, if they want to come down, we'll be there.
We'll be open.
And ready to meet with them. A couple other things have also transpired recently. On Thursday afternoon, this past Thursday, we had our kickoff meeting with FEMA officials in terms of the public assistance side of the FEMA response, and public assistance refers to the assistance to public entities. So those that work with cities and counties impacted in the specific damages and cost recoveries that cities are eligible for, and met our public assistance coordinator, and part of that team. That team is still being assembled as we speak, and over time, we will get different folks in that are going to fill those roles. But we at least had that initial meeting and covered the basics of the FEMA role in working with cities and counties and eligible cities and counties in recovering eligible costs. And the FEMA designation has taken place for what's called categories A through G. A and B are, A is debris removal and B is emergency protective measures. And A and B are kind of the primary ones that you always think of, but C through G deal with other areas and more permanent responses and recovery efforts, and they deal with roads and bridges, water control facilities, public buildings and equipment, public utilities, and parks and recreation, and they tag on to parks and recreation, other. So anything else that we don't think fits in there, we put into the category G. And so we are working through those areas and have done a very detailed job in tracking all of our expenditures by department, and we're in the process of designating them by department and by what we think is the appropriate category. And when our project specialist gets on board, who has not been introduced to us yet, we'll be working with them to determine the best way to make those applications, because we will make multiple applications based on specific needs. And right now, our determination is that it seems to make the most sense to break it down by departmental function and by the appropriate category in this A through G categorization. So we're working on that, and that's going to be an ongoing process. The state did announce that it will assist local governments in the local match component. FEMA provides a 75% match for eligible expenses, and there's a 25% local, and the state has agreed to provide half of that. So 12.5% comes from the state, and 12.5% will come from us, which will essentially be the cost we've already incurred in terms of responding, but that does help us immensely in meeting those responsibilities, and we're real pleased that the state has provided that assistance to local governments across the state. One of the statements that the FEMA officials made that I don't know if all of you heard, but that we've heard, that this flooding may rate as the worst non-hurricane flooding in history of the United States, which is hard to believe, but that's what we're hearing. They're still kind of assessing it all, but in terms of non-hurricane, the extent of it and the number of counties impacted. So I guess we'll wait to get that totally confirmed, but that gives you an order of magnitude of what we're looking at, and the 46 some counties in Tennessee and close to 30 counties in Kentucky. So it is wide scale, and it is truly a historic event in terms of a disaster.
Hey Eric, were they talking about the magnitude of the flood along with the cost as well? Scale
and magnitude of the whole event overall. That's how I understood it. So they're still kind of assessing that, but that's where we are.
Speaking of cost, I know that whenever you sent the list of the I guess properties that have the 50% flood damage, would you want to give a total of the assessed value of those?
Of those 30, I don't have that, but of the total of all of the residential, the assessed value is around 85 million, right, and we have about 16.5 million in damage of the large group. Now, the greater than 50%, I don't have that in front of me, but I know we have that number.
That would be good.
I can provide that to you.
That'd be good to have.
The other piece of information we received on Friday was the letter from the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency announcing the start of the process for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program and their funding strategy related to that. It starts the process for us participating or looking at participating in the opportunity to acquire and demolish flood-prone property, provide detention retention basins, make drainage improvements, various other mitigation steps that can be taken to help with preventing future flood damage and do the best we can to especially help repetitive areas that receive flood damage on a regular basis, not just a historic event like this, but on a more regular basis as well. This is, again, a process that works where we make application to the state makes application to the federal government. We receive just the basic information involved in this. What TEMA has said is they'll provide us with a time frame to look at this and decide if we want to at least submit a request for information, and then from there would set up a specific briefing with us sometime in July. I am prepared to do that if the board is comfortable with us taking that step. It doesn't necessarily commit us to the program, but it takes us into the next step where we can get more specifics from TEMA in terms of how they're going to work it and how it applies with what we are assessing in our community. So with the board's approval, I'd like to go ahead and submit that, and actually I believe I have the authority to do that, but I want to run that by you tonight and make sure you're all comfortable with us taking that step. That concludes the prepared remarks I wanted to give you in terms of the various items that we've got out there and that are ongoing. Again, people continue to work this, and it will go on for months and months as we continue to try to handle the response and the documentation of the response that's already happened and work with FEMA officials to get the appropriate reimbursement to deal with the other programs that are out there as well that we want to explore. So this is a project that adds a lot of additional responsibilities to a lot of folks in our organization, along with doing their regular jobs. And I want to just recognize that. We all think about it when the event is happening and the extraordinary efforts that happen then, and that was absolutely tremendous. But there's all this other work that will continue for months as we work through the recovery process and the mitigation and preparedness process so that we're even better prepared the next time around. So that's where we are.
Yeah.
Before I got on this board, before I was elected, one of our citizens made the remark to me that we were very unprepared for a crisis in our state, in our county, in our town. And I'd just like to say that I think we have proven that we can handle, our folks can handle whatever comes down the pipe. After what you said, that this was the greatest flood we had. I think it's just remarkable that and I hope he's listening. He was right. I think we've done really, really, really well.
Well, I have faith that if you see him, you'll tell him.
Well, that's just the opposite of everything I've heard. I have not, honestly, I can say, I have not heard one negative comment. It's amazing.
Well, this happened before.
No, this was before.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
long
Misunderstood.
Months before, months ago.
But it's amazing after the fact that the incredible comments that I've heard about our staff and about the administration of the city. So I just want to continuously tell the staff and the department heads that you did an amazing job, and the people continuously talk about it in the city, and you were incredibly helpful and helped so many people. And I think there would have been lives lost, and I think there would have been a lot more damage in other ways as well if you all did not were prepared, and the administration and Eric and your team, as you led the team, and with the fire and the police and all the department heads. So we can't continuously say this all the time, but we can't thank you enough for everything you've done.
Let me add one other little fact I didn't give you, sorry. I just saw this. We issued in the month of May 211 no-charge building permits.
211?
Total permits, yeah. And if you look at that, there's about 45 of them were through building permits, 71 electrical permits, 77 mechanical permits, and 18 plumbing permits. All of those were issued in the month of May at no charge, and that's a total of 211. I meant to mention that and didn't.
Clyde. Oh, Clyde gets to talk. He's been very patient.
Very patient. What programs specifically in parks have been affected by the,
What programs?
Yeah.
Let me add, if Lisa's here, you want to comment specifically? I know they're not playing a lot of softball at Fieldstone Park.
no, benches are down.
It's very
Yeah,
soft.
so, but Lisa can probably tell you a little more specifically some of the impacts.
Sure. Really, it's been all of Fieldstone, from our rentals to the softball program. Williamson County runs the adult softball from men leagues to churches. But what we have, we've been in touch with the county to let them know. Right now, we've done most of the demolition. We have 2 of the fields down, but it is closed off right now. We suffered damage from the facility, the pavilions on site, the playground. There was nothing untouched in Fieldstone. But we do have coming before the board in late June, the bid award for the, we had just turned around the fencing. So hopefully we'll be able to get that up. Our goal is to have it running by the end of July because senior game's coming to town. And so that is where we play. So we're doing everything possible to make sure that's taken care of.
So mostly Fieldstone and mostly adult softball programs.
That is it. The same week of the flood, we were down with Jim Warren for 3 days. And we were able to start baseball by that Wednesday to Thursday night.
You can hear the crack of the bat every
Yes,
I do it at my house. You do it here at your house.
Yeah. Well, I'm there.
I'll be there tonight, depending on when we get there.
That was the existing.
We got 2 old place softball. This is a senior.
Mike?
I'm on the Williamson County Solid Waste Board. Last week, they were very appreciative of the assistance that our solid waste department gave them because they really don't have the equipment that we do. And they just couldn't say enough about the cooperation that the City of Franklin gave to their residents that needed it.
Yeah, Becky and her team got knuckle boom and operators out there to get things going and help with the large debris pickup there too. So that was, yeah, we really appreciate being able to do that. That's important to be able to help each other.
Back to TEMA, at least the residents I've talked to are interested in the flood mitigation program, and I assume that you're getting feedback from them also, so I would...
We know there are some folks interested in that, and we also need to look at it from a strategic standpoint in terms of city and storm management, and how does that play into our ability to have a system that's even better positioned to handle future events.
Exactly.
So.
Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you, Eric. Item number 4 is a discussion regarding employment opportunity for felons with records. We had, Mr. Spool was here at our last meeting and speak at our BOMA meeting about concerns he has. I know he just walked in. And Pearl, if you kind of
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we allow Mrs. Spool to come forward and share with this committee so that there could be some kind of exchange or discussion. And Mr. Mayor and fellow board members, if you indulge me to allow Mr. Spool to come forward and share with us some of his views, and we can't make any promises. I do want to
You sit right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do want to allow one of our citizens to come forward and share and maybe let us know what kinds of things out there.
Yes, I was here at April 13th meeting, I believe, and my concern at the time was to have opportunity for those that may have felon on the record, opportunity for job employment, not to just consider the application, not to put in file 13, and those were my requests. And I also stated for those that was not present at the April 13th meeting that we all are one mistake away from being incarcerated. We all are one sickness away from being on a sick bed, or one stroke or heart attack away from being out of here, period. And sometime individual may make a mistake, and first time and never again. Young, some are young, some are old. But I thought I've encountered so many young folks seeking employment, and they have informed me that they're not able to get employment because of the felony on the record. Some are very minor incidents they may have encountered. And I just was asking, maybe the city would consider those individuals' application, not representing any particular group, but individuals that may have made a mistake. And if, I think this would give us all, City of Franklin, City of Franklin is a great place to live. I've been here for 7 years, and we kind of promote the city as being a place to come. A lot of individuals have moved here from different places, and I thought maybe individuals who live here should be given opportunity. It's something maybe the city can consider. I'm not sure if this workshop is.
Well, I think we can maybe just tell kind of what our current policy is and how we deal with that. And Eric, I know you probably are familiar with where we are on those things.
I can give you a broad overview, and if we need more specifics, we have some other folks who are probably more experienced at that can probably address it. But I'll tell you, we are an equal opportunity employer, and we do accept applications from anyone who wants to apply for a position. There are certain security-sensitive positions that we do not hire an ex-felon for, say some certain positions in the police department or maybe certain areas in our finance department, that sort of thing. There are certain areas where we do have those kinds of restrictions, but other positions, all are welcome to apply and will be considered, and our only commitment is that we just try to hire the very best person for that position to fill that position. And so that's really where we are and how we approach job applicants. We don't really provide any specific allowance for some folks to be hired, not other folks to be hired. We really just try to be open to all and then have an open, fair process to determine who's the best match for our vacancies. And so that's kind of the general policy and approach that we take.
In my comment, Mrs. Sproul, you and I have had this discussion, is that in my business, in healthcare, we do not employ, we do not hire, we do not accept applications from anyone with a felon on the record, and that's just part of it. So I think your question is very noble. However, it's a bigger picture than I think what we can address here, because I think there are more discussion that needs to take place on employment of individuals with some type of failure of background check, because background check is a major important role in employment these days, and we have so many people currently that is come out of college, been flooded out or whatever, that is seeking, who have lost jobs due to a lot of things. So I think the timing is very interesting, but I think it's a larger picture, and this may not be the place where it needs to happen. It may need to happen more on the state level. That's my comment.
Oh, I have a comment too before Shirley. I'm sure you've got something to add in, but I guess maybe this will go along with maybe a question I have as well. But I'll just make a statement. What I hear Eric saying is that we will consider the application. Just because they have that on their record does not mean it would be discarded. Okay. And they would get a fair opportunity to be considered. And then once they are looked at as far as qualifications to do that particular job, say you had 10 applicants and you took 5 and said 5 have that qualification or they could do this job, that those people would be in that pool of 5. And if they interviewed the 5 or 3 people, whatever it would be, these people would have an opportunity to come in and sell themselves as and they would have an opportunity, wouldn't they, and Shirley, in the process of being interviewed, to say, yes, I had this on my record, but I feel like I've made a mistake in my life and I want an opportunity and I'm a hard worker and I've got a good work ethic. And you can see that in the questions. I'm sure the way HR does this, they would seek that out, right?
Right. And we accept applicants. The city's policy is to only accept applications when there is an opening for a specific position. And we do that. We accept from anyone. There is a question that asks if you have been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor of moral turpitude. And There are some jobs that will preclude that applicant from, but we consider everyone, and we are an equal opportunity employer, and I believe Angie told you that the day you came in. Anyone can go online and apply or come in and get an application for any open position, and they are considered. Everyone is considered. And we do a panel that looks at the qualifications, if they meet the qualifications. We look at them, we interview them. There is a panel, they're ranked based on education, abilities, depending on the job. There are criteria, and we rank them. They're interviewed, and the department director can hire any of the top 3 applicants without regard to the rank in the top 3. And that is currently our policy, and has been for quite some time.
It's an opportunity. Good.
Okay.
Yeah,
wait.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, it sounds like this is the only thing I was asking, to
Sure.
have the application
Have the
looked at.
Yeah.
Naturally, I wouldn't be asking, well, if someone's not qualified for the job to be
Certainly.
considered. I'm not asking it, I'm just asking those individuals who could qualify for a given position
Right.
to be
Yeah,
considered.
they're not discarded.
Right,
They
that's the only thing I was
No,
asking.
and I hope you understand that.
And we can assure you that's not the case.
Yeah.
So, Clyde?
John, going back to item 2 in the bigger picture where you've got citizen comments again, make sure that everyone understands that this doesn't have to be the process for a citizen to come to this committee and express a concern. We've always been open, we've always stated that, and we've always followed that policy. So if you're watching or seeing this doesn't necessarily mean that this is the way you have to do something other. You can come here, if in certain comments, if it's not on the agenda, sit, have your say, and we'll listen to it just as if it were on the agenda as it is tonight.
Yeah. As he did in April when he
Yep,
addressed the
when he was
board
at
mayor,
Dawn.
which is what it's there for. All right, thank you very much, appreciate it. All right, I hope we answered your question.
You did.
All right, thank you. Okay, item number 5, discussion on creating policy for determining when unused public right-of-way should be vacated or declared surplus property. We have a presentation and some discussion. Kelly's here.
I'll just offer a couple comments before we start off. This is a follow-up to some discussion we had earlier in the year that arose around some specific properties. But what staff really tried to do is look at the broader policy. So I ask you tonight, as we talk about the policy, to really try to look at it in terms of a broader policy framework, not necessarily about what about this specific property or that specific property, but really how we want to approach it as a city and what makes sense for us in terms of identifying, which has been part of this effort, and then working in terms of how we manage and respond to these unused city right-of-way areas. So, I don't know, Vernon?
Well, thank you,
Kelly,
Eric.
however you wanna go from there.
Good evening. Eric's correct, and we want to emphasize that we're not here this evening to talk about any particular property or unused right-of-way. Kelly's charge and the staff's charge was to survey all the unused right-of-way within the city and develop a matrix or a framework for which staff can make recommendations should this topic come up or issue come up with a particular property in which, or a piece of right-of-way in which we need to provide you a recommendation. Ultimately, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen will decide. But this gives you an idea of how the staff will justify making a particular recommendation. And then as we go forward, if there's a particular right-of-way that you want to discuss individually or as the board, we'll be more than happy to bring it forth, but I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? No? Yes?
I can't ever hear.
That doesn't sound like it's working.
Well,
Is that working? Is that working because it's...
I think it is.
Yeah, it
It
is.
sounds better.
It is now.
I just want to make
Better.
sure. But this was a cross-departmental collaboration with administration, building and neighborhood services, engineering, fire, GIS, planning and sustainability, police, streets, and water and sewer. And there were three major components to this, and the first was inventorying all of the unused right-of-way in the city, which basically means unpaved. There's not a street there. The second was providing some criteria for determining whether or not we should dispose of that unused right-of-way. And the third part, after the board decides that it should be disposed of, provide some options on how to do that. But first, before we look at those three parts, I want to talk about what governs BOMA decisions about the disposal of real property. So we look to the Tennessee Code Annotated, the TCA, and it's relatively quiet on the disposal of surplus right-of-way. But generally, it gives the city's broad discretion over the sale or lease of property if the charter or the municipal code gives them the authority. So then we look to the city charter. And the charter says the city shall have the power to acquire or receive and hold, maintain, improve, sell, lease, mortgage, pledge, or otherwise dispose of property for any municipal purpose. So that gives us the authority. And the second part of that is how we dispose of that property. And we look to the municipal code for that. Now there's a lot of text on this slide, so I've summarized it on the next slide, which is sort of a decision tree matrix based on the value of the property, which comes from the municipal code. So this slide outlines what the code says. And if a property is worth $25,000 or more, you look on the right side of this slide, and it says, the code says that the property shall be sold by the sealed bid process, unless there are unique circumstances that make public advertisement impossible or impracticable. And then, in that case, you can use the left side of the slide. But in general, if it's worth over $25,000, it's sold by sealed bid at auction. Now, if it's less than $25,000, there's a couple different options. You can sell or dispose by negotiated contract, and that's usually done through a quitclaim deed and vacating. And then the other way, which is not really recommended by our law department, is abandoning it. And the difference between vacating and abandoning is that vacating means that the city is giving it, is designating it to a person or someone. Abandoning it means that we throw up our hands and say that it's not ours, and it's not anyone else's either, it's just not ours anymore. So there's some real consequences to just abandoning property when you have adjacent property owners that may have potential disputes over something like that. Now, what have we done in the past? There's not been a real consistent, over the long term, there hasn't been a real consistent department where this has originated. And not really a clear, consistent process either. We look back over time and there's maybe a note on a plat, or maybe BOMA voted on it. Since 1998, we've done it by resolution, but prior to that, it's not quite as clear. And the other part of it is the notification to Williamson County. We're not real sure that that happened every time, and the result of that is in some of our mapping, which is to say that the mapping is not perfect. But we'll talk about the right-of-way inventory. We've used the data that we have available, and there are 65 rights-of-way that are not currently used, which means they're not paved. Most of those are located within the Mac Hatcher bypass in the older part of the city. And of those 65, almost half don't require any action at all because we need those in the future. About 25 of those could have the potential for disposal. And another 11 need to be studied further. There could be some technical or mapping errors that have arisen, or there's potentially possibility for development, which means that it probably falls into the $25,000 or more category. But what we found in this inventory through all the departments is that each one is unique with the shape and the conditions, with the ownership, with the lot configuration. So each one is going to need to be studied individually when it comes time, if the board decides to move forward with disposal of any of these. And it's also important, obviously, to err on the conservative side and focus on the emphasis to retain that right-of-way. So the second major part of this is developing the criteria for the city on whether or not to dispose of the unused right-of-way. So here's where we break from state and city ordinances, and this is what the staff recommendation is on when the board should declare surplus. When there's currently no public transportation infrastructure there, when it's not needed for future public transportation infrastructure, when the disposal serves the public interest, and it reduces the city's maintenance liability. For example, we had to go in and remove a tree for the cost of $5,000 because it was inaccessible in an unused alley. Conversely, staff would recommend that the right-of-way be kept when it's reasonable that it could be extended in the future, it's adjacent to undeveloped property, there's potential for redevelopment or further development there, it serves as public access to parkland, or when one or more properties would become landlocked, and when it's also shown in any approved plan for recommended street improvements. So these are all pretty common sense, reasonable reasons to keep right-of-way. So here's a couple examples. Example A is Fort Granger Drive. You can see in the red kind of hatch where the unused right-of-way is, meaning there's not a street there. To the south of that is Fort Granger, and the south of that is Pinkerton Park. You can see the river and downtown Franklin off to the west. But in this case, the street could be extended there. It's like a driveway that's used to access the park there. It provides access to the park, will likely need it in the future, and Fort Granger would become landlocked if we disposed of that right-of-way. Not that the city would sue itself over selling the right-of-way, but the recommendation would be to keep it and have no action.
Agreed.
Example B is Liberty Hills Drive. You can see McEwen to the north and Mallory Lane to the east, and Liberty Hills Drive is right there in the red hatch. It's a grass-covered right-of-way area that terminates into the Southern Land Office as part of the McEwen Town Center. When you apply the criteria for disposal, there's no current public transportation infrastructure there. The street is not likely to be extended since that plan was approved just a few years ago. Disposing of it would reduce the city's maintenance liability, and so that's one where the BOMA could consider disposal. The third component of this is then how. Once the city decides that it no longer needs this right-of-way, how should we do it? It's going back to the decision tree matrix with the $25,000 being the cutoff, which comes from state law on state lands, so we're making an educated guess, but we think that number comes from modeling it after the state statute on state surplus property. But if the options are over $25,000, to sell it by sealed bid according to municipal code. Now there's another option here that's kind of creative, and that's dividing property into smaller pieces until the value falls below $25,000. And that's something that the board should discuss tonight. There's several options if the value is under $25,000. These again are what staff is recommending here. And the first is to vacate the surplus property 50-50 equally to property owners on each side. And that can be done when nobody's using it for access, or when a street was realigned somewhere else and it's no longer needed by the city. The second is the same thing as the first, but do it with easements. And do it with easements because there's possibly private driveways there, or properties are using it for access, or when the city right-of-way contains future or existing public utilities, emergency access, drainage, or other public uses in that right-of-way. The third is to vacate it all to one property owner, and this might be done when there's either one property owner that owns both sides, or when there's an existing driveway access to one property that's internal to the street, where it's a developed lot and there's only one driveway going into one lot, and it doesn't make any sense to vacate it to the adjacent properties when the property behind them is needing it for access. So applying this back to Liberty Hills Drive, we want to err on the conservative side. So even though there's not a street access, there might be a long-term possibility of pedestrian access to the town center after it develops out. So the staff recommendation on that conservative side is vacate the property with easements, just in case there might be some future possibility of a pedestrian trail connecting the residential to the town center. Now, there's a lot of different directions that BOMA has to consider in this. Realizing the maximum value of the city-owned property and the taxpayer dollars. Is it the right thing for the neighborhood to keep it, to dispose of it? Does it compete with other policy goals? Past maintenance? If it's a larger area, what could be done about that? And then staff's role, which is to provide a professional recommendation based on the long-term health of the city and focusing on state statute, city ordinances, case law, best practices, and provide you that recommendation. So, as Eric said, we'd like to look at the big picture tonight and look at this policy and get your direction and feedback on it. And then at a later date, we can come back with specific current examples and apply the policy based on your direction to them.
Just before we get, and I just want to reiterate, we've come across this issue a couple times. We don't have a designated policy, and so we've asked staff to come up with kind of where we are and what to look at. I've had an opportunity to go through this a week ago, and it generated a lot of questions in my mind. I still have some other questions, and so this isn't anything we're going to bring forward next, at the next BOMA meeting. I do think it takes some discussion and thought. Certainly, I know there may be some questions tonight, but the important thing is to think about sort of different ramifications, because you won't think about them all tonight. I know that for a fact because I've come up with some ideas. So again, I like to keep it broad. We're at the 50,000 foot level right now, trying to come up with some policy. So because we're not here to address specific properties. Michael?
What establishes the value of the property? Does it do appraisals, or do we go comps from the tax rolls?
There's a plethora of different things.
It can be based on realtors, professional advice, comp sales, tax data from Williamson County. And the board has this, in its sole discretion, the ability to hire a certified independent appraiser as well.
So in essence, the board can decide what the value is with reasonable justification, I would say. I mean, so, we may go to the tax map and say, or the tax cards and say it's appraised at $30,000 land, and that would be a...
Now, it can't be, if it's the city right-of-way, it's not appraised or anything on the tax rolls, is it?
No.
It's not.
On comp.
We could look at adjacent
on
properties
adjacent
and
comps, yeah.
the values of those
Yeah,
properties.
you're right
So
about that.
all you've done now is identify. You have not had the appraisals done. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we wouldn't do that.
That's right,
I
that
mean,
would
we
be
wouldn't
money.
appraise them. I mean, what we might do is, first of all, we've got to try to figure out how we would proceed, but, and I don't think we'd just go out and try to take half the ones that have some idea and say, well, let's do something with those. I think we might just have a policy, and if an issue comes up, or if a piece of property comes up, or several, then we have some basis by which to start the process. This piece of property on Liberty Pike might be, or in Liberty Hills subdivision or whatever, I know where it is, I forget the road, but, that might be logical, but nobody's caught, yelling or crying or asking to do anything about that. I mean, so I think it's just kind of be on a case-by-case basis as need might require, or a homeowner may come to us and say, I've been maintaining this piece of property for 20 years, I'd really like to own it, and then they may instigate that process, and I think that would be legitimate as well.
There is some cost to going through this process in the form of staff time.
Absolutely.
Possibly appraisals, but definitely boundary surveys. So it's not something that we wanted to move forward with and start surveying properties without, the direction from the board on if there are any that the board would like to have done.
But again, there may be some liability issues out there that we need to look at, that, a piece of property that may have some issues on it that we might be better off not having. And the other issue, in my opinion, is that, while we don't do much of it, our requirement is we should be maintaining those properties. I mean, they belong to us, and we should be maintaining them, and we don't. Well, we may on a few, but the majority of them are being maintained by somebody else. And I think there's some consideration value, and she mentions that moral and ethical issues that have to do with that, so.
Where is which project is or which segment is the Liberty Hills?
It's actually in
in
Cheswick
Cheswick.
Farms.
Oh, okay, that's the reason I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
It was very difficult to find some innocuous examples of right-of-way.
And we're not, for the press, we are not proposing that we do that
Oh, please don't
for
resurrect
that
that.
particular piece of property. It's just being used
That's
as
my
an
word.
example.
Is
We'll
there
get a
some-
call
is there some
tomorrow.
kind
We'll
of
get the
barrier?
property owners on either
Let's
side.
make that very clear.
For example purposes.
Oh, that's right.
Now, this does include alleys, all of our dedicated alleys, whether they're dedicated or not, or?
Any right-of-way that is not used, meaning it doesn't have any kind of street or alley asphalt.
Unpaved.
It's all
use on
unpaved.
it.
These are all
It's all
unpaved.
unpaved. It may
pieces of
contain a private driveway or two in some instances. But that's where, we would want to look at easements if disposal is an option in those instances.
It may have been in here, but I did not see, unless it was the contact with Williamson County, how you add that value to someone's property. Was it?
Oh, if you
That's
did the sale.
the notification process to Williamson County issue.
No, but remember
I
the one
think you're
that was
asking
back
something.
behind, off of,
Yeah.
Off of Adams.
Not off of Adams, but off of, over there close to the school.
Are you
To the
asking
elementary
about
school?
reappraising?
Did we talk about
Once
that?
they're,
Okay,
once they
that-
have
that-
another strip?
Off of Battle?
So
Off of Battle?
50/50 split where we sell it, how does that
No,
change? or-
if you had 20-foot of property, 100 foot of depth, 20 feet wide, that's increased the value of their property.
You record a quitclaim deed, and you notify the county that that's what happened.
But nominally, it is not a large amount because it's not really adding another developable site. And it may be 10 feet or 20 feet of land and
In some
in
instances.
some instances.
But
Yeah.
but remember whenever we were looking at that, wasn't it off of Battle, now that I'm
I
trying?
think it was off of Battle behind.
Off of Battle.
Between the.
It was an alley, wasn't it?
It was, and one of the concerns of the people who own the property there was that it would increase their property tax because it would add to the size of the lot.
Yeah,
How much
but
you
there was a
adding?
different reason. I mean, they came to us and asked us to close that down. if I remember
To close the
correctly.
alley down,
Close the
yeah.
alley down. But, you know, again, unless it's a big piece of property, then it would be, I mean, if it were even less than $25,000, you do the taxes on that, and it's not significant. I mean, it's something, but it's not significant. And the other thing, if it's over 25,000, we decide to do it by sealed bid, that's people are actually bidding on
Right.
a piece of property.
So my understanding is that we would, only if it's under 25,000 would we have those other options. That's the, kind of the defining, we could ask for it to be split, to reduce it if it was less than, but you have to start off with what the value.
Let me make an example. We did discuss about this the other day. So we had a piece of property that was between two houses, and say it was a developable piece of property. It was big enough for a house. There may be some concerns on that, and there are two options. One, if we think it's more than $25,000, then we, by city ordinance, have to bid that out. However, there is an option, and that option would be we could divide it in half. And if we divided it in half, it would be less than $25,000, and then we could approach the two neighboring homeowners and say, would you be interested in acquiring your half of that piece of property? And that is an option that can be done. There are ways to, there are different ways to approach a piece of property that have a value over 20, but we may not choose to do that either. I mean, the board has the option to do that.
What if the same owner owned the property on each side of the
See, that's
right-of-way?
where,
That's in there.
that's in there.
They addressed that.
But it would still, you can still divide it in half.
And still sell it?
Because
To the same owner.
either side of those houses would be different parcels as well. You don't own the same parcel and have something in between them. I've never seen that situation. That is a city piece of property. In other words, it wouldn't be parcel one on both sides of a city-owned easement. One would be parcel one, one would be parcel two. So there'd be, I've never seen a situation, I mean, I guess
It could be, yeah.
it could be, but
Yeah.
more than likely, I wouldn't think so.
Well,
Mr. Gurr.
no, I was going to say, we're talking about this, go ahead, Vernon. You go
Well,
ahead.
what I was going to say is that what the staff is trying to get at is that whether you as elected officials, representative of the community, or residents come to us that are adjacent or has a piece of unused right-of-way in their neighborhood, it's incumbent upon us to give them some type of an idea of what our recommendation would be. It's up to you to make this decision and deliberate on a case-by-case basis. And so what I'm asking you to do, because I know we have a multitude of other items on the agenda, think about the policy that staff and Kelly put together. If you have some questions, forward them to Kelly or I. We'll put it together and just bring it forth. But it's really about staff's ability to provide predictable, concise information to you or to residents when this question
Of
arises.
course, let me ask that question. you presented to us what we can do by law right now. That's in city charter and other things. That, I mean, we can make an ordinance, but if we're required to do it already, why would we need to do that?
Does this
Well, I see what you're talking about. Why have another policy if we already have something
If
that
there's already,
applies?
that's more of a theoretical question.
Right,
than-
right. I know what you're saying.
We're still following the law, but we're proposing a framework, sort of questions that we ask as we consider it about
Ask that question.
transportation plans, what else is going on, neighborhood impact. We make a recommendation based on those factors, but you ultimately make the decision.
Right.
Still following the law and what we have, so we're not really proposing any changes there, but it's how we apply it in the framework we give you and information that we provide. And also, as Vernon pointed out, the dialogue that happens with neighbors or folks that may be interested in that unused right away.
The best example is the one you've talked about, and that's why I intervened, is that if the property's worth $25,000 and you maybe want to reduce the cost over $25,000, you want to consider reducing the cost so you can transfer it to each property or negotiate a sale. That's really the decision that you might get into. One of many examples, as Kelly
I
went
think
through.
you're right, that we need to send you our questions. I've got a number of them, and I'm not going to go into them right now. I'm just going to say one thing, that I think we need to have the option, though, to divide this property up. Like you said, you might take something that's over $25,000 and divide that up if you had two homeowners on both sides, which is a possibility. But I think to divide the property in smaller pieces until the value drops to 25 doesn't always fit, and so we need to have that flexibility. That has to be there, because every case will be different in itself. You know, one piece of property is not going to fit that same criteria over and over. So we have to have the flexibility, I would think, according to the individual properties.
We're going to have,
I
one more.
have
Yeah,
a
one more.
question that I
Okay.
need to
All right.
ask,
Okay.
because item 12 on our agenda tonight talks about the disposal of surplus real property, and it says real property that is to be sold, leased, or abandoned for use in the affordable and workforce housing program as approved by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen is exempt from any bidding or publication requirements?
That was an item that had come up last year when
Right.
we began conversations. We're going to ask that that be deferred until we get through
this.
through all this.
Right,
Yeah.
but it's on our agenda for
Yes,
tonight.
and that's because that was when the motion was made to defer, it came back to a specific item, and Linnea and the staff do a very good job at tracking that to make sure it turns back up on the agenda.
Okay, all right.
But the back of it says it's recommended to be presented as presented as recommended. But that was back.
That was there.
That's back at
So
that.
we don't have any
Right.
extra, and it doesn't, I didn't see in here that it said defer.
I just want to say, Kelly, I think this is an excellent presentation.
As always.
Very well explained.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I also want to say, whenever you look at some of these things, there's something in Sturbridge there that was not a street, it was just access to the open space for the people in the subdivision. I mean, that doesn't sound like surplus property to me.
Half of those that are identified in this require no action whatsoever.
No, but I'm
And not
saying, how
recommended
can we
for
say
either.
that's surplus property whenever it's just access to open space?
Depends on what it said in the, it said in the plat. That it could be owned by the homeowner association.
Well, that's what I wondered about.
Yeah, it probably
It's not
would
that
be
it's
owned by the
surplus,
homeowners
It's that
association.
it's,
Yeah.
And that's not our surplus property, that would be the
That's-
homeowners.
I
Yeah.
wondered about
Yeah.
that. That
more than
didn't
the
sound, that's the one I knew the most about.
On a newly developed property like that, I'd be almost certainly that would be the
Yeah.
homeowner association
Right.
recorded plat.
Right.
All right, let's move on to item number 6. Thank you, Kelly and Vernon. Yes, sir?
Yeah, I'd like to speak.
Okay, please come forward.
My name's William Brim, and I live in the Rolling Meadow subdivision. And we'd like to know, we formed a committee and everything, as the board suggested. And we would like to know, how do we fall in this category? Are we potential, non-potential?
Well, your piece of property would be considered one of these pieces of properties, those 4 parcels or 5, whatever they are. But no, absolutely no decision has been made or will be made very shortly on that. But your property is a piece of property that is owned by the city of Franklin.
Right.
So it would fall into that category.
What we're asking is, are we, like I think there's 6 or 7 lots there, are they some of the lots that's considered to do something with or not to do?
We haven't made that decision at all. No, this is just setting out parameters by which staff might make those recommendations one way or the other.
Okay. Now, all the properties in question have came out and been surveyed, and some of the property owners there have some issues with where the stakes are, considering with their old property lines. Is there any way we can get access to those surveys?
You can contact Vernon Girth at Building and Neighborhood Services, and he will have copies of those surveys.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
and y'all will
Okay.
get back.
We absolutely will, yes.
All right. Thank you.
So some of it's already been surveyed?
Yes, I think they all have.
In Rolling Meadows.
I don't know if we've gotten
In
the
Rolling
final.
Meadows or everywhere?
No, just Rolling
Rolling
Meadows.
Meadows, we did that.
The issue that come up.
But I don't know if we've got copies of, the final copies of those surveys or not. Do we? Okay, we do have them, yes, okay.
I'm Pearlette Green, and I'd just like to make a statement. We have lived in Rolling Meadows since 1964. And my husband and I would like to purchase property. My family owns property on both sides of one area. In another area, Ms. Hodderson and I live on both sides of an area, and we are interested in purchasing that property. I sent an email, and most of you probably didn't get it. I didn't find out about this meeting till late. I just like to just give you this, and when you're thinking about that, just consider that.
We'll pass them all along right here if you've got copies. But they are, copy that is in your
And we
email.
have maintained that since '59.
Thank you,
I'd like
Pearlette.
you to.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Okay. But for anybody who's out in the and watching this or listening to this, this will be a subject that will be very openly discussed. Nothing will be crammed down anybody's throat without a lot of discussion. Well, excuse me, it will never be crammed down anybody's throat. I misspoke.
You may have been on target the first time.
We're going to discuss it first, then we're going to cram it down your throat. But we'll be very open, and I think there'll be plenty of opportunities for future discussion about this how we're doing this. At least I caught myself quickly before I said that. Item number 6, Police Headquarters Project Budget Update.
Ask Brad to come up.
Mr. Brad.
We will just do this very quickly. One of the things that triggered wanting to put this on here to give you a little bit of an update is where we are with the project as we nearly complete in the wrap-up stage. And you'll also notice on tonight's agenda, there's a list of items that are sort of cleanup items that are under the administrative authority that you granted earlier in the project for us to provide. But I wanted to give you a broader context of where we are. You'll note that those virtually cancel each other out because there's 2 big credits at the end of that list. Yeah. But wanted to give you the context of where we are with the project when we are, I don't know, Brad, 99% there, and what it looks like in terms of project budget and where we're coming out. You'll look at that 3rd page in the handout that we have that Brad has summarized the project. And right now at a little over 1.1 million under budget. And in addition to that 1.1 million, we've got just under $100,000 in our owner's contingency. So, there are a few things that we're still wrapping up, and Brad can maybe give you a quick oversight on that, but that's what we're continuing to work through, and I wanted to give you the context of the project as it stands now, especially as you see some of these cleanup, wrap-up items that we're working through. But Brad, give us your insights on this as well.
Well, what I tried to do was to go ahead and show the board in the process of trying to do my cleanups and my write-ups, there were some items that I didn't get in time for Eric and I to go over completely to put on the listing for tonight. But I've tried to include, or what I have done is I have included those items that will be coming up. Some additional electrical services at the police headquarters as requested during our move-ins. We're doing a final plat survey. I've included that number. So I've tried to go ahead and include to give you that sense of that larger number, that 1.1 of including numbers that we will be paying out in regards to some of these items. So that's pretty simple.
There may be another, you've assumed about a 20,000 or so of items that are still in the pipeline that you'll probably see on your
We
list
do. We've got
coming up.
We do. We've got a couple of other things that are rolling in, but nothing of really of a greater value, of a real high value.
But we wanted to give you that summary of where we are in the context of all those items coming through. And I want to just compliment Brad and David Prather from the police department who've been on this project every day, kind of living it and breathing it, and the extra efforts they've made to get it done and bring it in well under budget. So I just wanted to publicly thank those guys too for their great efforts with that too.
Yeah, and I looked at the regular board first before I looked at this, and I thought, oh, I'd really like to see all those. So then whenever I looked at this, I was very pleased. Thank you.
Eric does a good job of getting me under control sometimes.
Thank you. Any questions? Item number 7, we're pulling. Item number 8 is, I'm correct on 7?
Yes, correct.
Item number 8, discussion regarding the funding of small CIP priorities. This is continued from the last work session. We're basically, I guess, staff's looking for direction as how to proceed with this, and there's not a, we just need, they need a little direction.
Go for it.
You have the memo.
Michael?
I have a question. Since we're saying that Eastern Flank ought to come out of hotel motel tax, and that's not CIP, and we're about to set the budget tonight, so.
Well, it is CIP,
it is.
absolutely. Anything capital is capital. We don't designate, in any of our things, we're not designating where the funding comes from.
Because it wasn't
all funds.
included in the budget, that it wouldn't be in the budget till next year.
What we would do is, it is CIP, but it is outside of the funding plan that we talked about last year when we set that in place. So it does go beyond that. We would need to simply amend the budget to move that forward, because that specific project is not in hotel motel as we proposed it, because we kind of hit the operating aspects and knew this may come and weren't sure of the dollar amount. So it would really be a matter of just going through and doing a budget amendment that provides for some level of project funding, whatever the board is comfortable with, however that comes together.
So would this be at the expense of other things that are already allocated within that?
We've really got some capacity in that budget. We've got about $1.1 million fund balance right now. We'd want to look at it in terms of when those draws would happen, but it's something that can be accommodated in that fund. That's why we brought it forward, because it's an eligible use, and we've got some unreserved dollars there that help us, and there are additional dollars that will be available in that fund too, as we retire the debt on the conference center in a couple years.
When
But
can we
there's
start
capacity
this?
now.
When can we
That's
start
my
it?
question.
Yeah, when can we start it? And the other thing is, not only when can we
When-
start it, but what type are we going to end up doing here? Because we talked about having in-kind donations, resources, so where are we with that?
I think the
It'll go
task
back.
force meets next week, and the board
Be
would ask
Thursday
for
this
some
week.
input. Yeah, this week, later this week.
My thought would be is that after this discussion tonight, that it would be appropriate for staff to bring an actual ordinance, well, I mean, it wouldn't be, I guess it would be a resolution forward stating and if the dollar amount for these particular projects and where the funding source is, and let's bring that forward as a resolution, and then we can move it through the BOMA process as people see fit. But we have to have something concrete to say we're going to do this or not do this. And so my recommendation would be come up with a dollar figure right off the bat for the eastern flank, because that's the only thing that's really kind of in limbo, because we don't know that. And then the other two that are on the recommended list, we can bring that forward in resolution. We can approve it or not approve it. I mean,
Okay, now.
Well, I think you're getting the nod from the committee to move forward on that, so I
Now,
don't.
wait a minute, wait just a minute, I want to ask some
What is
questions.
that going to include?
First of all, you are only talking about hotel motel for that one project.
correct. That's correct.
Okay. Whenever we're looking at the other, and I have on page 51, the debt service for the projected year, this next year, if you look, well, first of all, a real background, remember we have changed from last year 11.4 cents of our property tax going to pay for debt service. This year, we've got 19.3 cents out of the property tax going for debt service. That's a 70% increase there. So whenever you're talking about general fund debt service, then we also have what is proposed as the 2010 new bonds to be used for Hillsborough Road, 3rd Avenue Extension, and it says Columbia Avenue Streetscape. I don't know. I thought that had already been designated and paid, in some of the other projects. But what I'm saying to you is there's no money in the 2011 budget to pay any principal on any of that. If we are committed to all of these, that means that after this 2011 year, then our debt service is going to probably, in the general fund, and it's going to be up another maybe 1.1 million for that. And so I think, now if it's something that can be funded some other way, like hotel motel, I see that as a lot more viable than something that is going to have to come from the general fund debt service. And I want to tell you, road impact fee debt service is going to be underwater at the end of 2011 there. It's already proposed to be at a deficit there. So I think it's one thing to talk about eastern flank that can be paid through the hotel motel, and it's a whole different ballgame to talk about anything besides that.
Well, and which is why my point is that staff had put together a recommendation for the top three
That's right.
options. I would propose that we bring that forward in a resolution, and then we have the ability to either vote it yes or vote it down. I mean, I think that's our. I think we need to do that, other than say. I mean, there's no other way for us to act. We have to act one way or the other.
Absolutely.
So I would like to bring it forward in a resolution, and then let this body give it a thumbs up or thumbs down, amend it how they seem fit, and then we can go forward.
So you're thinking
The next meeting?
At the work session, there'll be a.
Work session, or do you want us to bring a resolution?
Well,
to the
we can just
voting
bring it to the voting board if you'd like, or we can bring it back to work session.
Can we talk about three of them?
Can we do those in separate entities so that they're not,
You want to do it project by project?
Yeah.
for those three?
We need to-
Sure.
yeah.
We can do that.
Plus,
Bring it to the voting meeting,
that-
because we've had this on twice.
We
so I
have.
don't know
I
We're going to
agree.
say a whole lot new.
Okay.
The
next
other
time.
thing is that going to include, if you're going to bring that information to us and the cost and everything, is that also going to include any offers of in-kind or donations?
Well,
on that we can see, or
all
is
we
it just
can
gonna
do
be our
at the
cost?
moment and Michael, if I misspoke, speak, tell me, but I think all we can do at the moment on the Eastern Flank Battlefield is to put a dollar figure there.
I agree.
And say, this is what we propose to spend on the Eastern Flank. And then we will have conversations with the Battlefield Task Force or Commission, and if they can get in-kind services, then that's it. But I think, they will set a time limit on themselves, that we either need to go forward, because the amount that's put in there is amount that will put a road through to and I hate to use the word half the road, but it will be,
Right.
I mean, it will be a road that goes in and will service the Eastern Flank Battlefield and and the Fleming Center and the Carton Plantation, and that $250,000 will do that. If we can piggyback with some other stuff and use that with that $250,000, then that's what I'm sure we would love to do that. So that gives them at least a target figure to work with. Is that right, Mike? You feel good about that? Okay.
And so we're talking about kind of looking at it at the minimum that we would fund.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, I was, we saw like three or four different iterations of the roadway. Are we looking at kind of the minimum that the city
I think the number was
spend?
about $250,000.
Okay.
The low was,
Okay.
250,
Okay.
260, something
Well,
like
that's
that.
not half a road, is it?
It is.
One lane, wait, one lane.
No, it is
No, it's not even a
it's an access
one-way.
road.
It is a road that goes in and comes out. It's just not a loop
No.
road.
And
It's not a
again,
loop road.
It's a road to nowhere.
The road to the Fleming Center. It goes to the.
We need to
Is that
get
what you say? You
directions
may
from
get
the battlefield, before we start saying it'll be this or this or this.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I agree with
but
you.
And let them do their recommendation.
Okay, let them do their recommendation, but still, are we going to have the several options there with their recommendation?
They will come back.
No, I mean, their recommendation will be one of them.
Their recommendation, I mean, they can't spend that money without the
Absolutely.
Board of Mayor and Alderman approving. it. So they will come back to the board and say, we can't raise any in-kind services, we're going to spend $250,000, here's what the road should look like, or we've got this company, that company, that
Okay,
company, and this is what the road will look like
Okay.
with your $250,000.
That-
And
that's
we'll
good.
discuss it and approve it.
Okay,
Then you
That's
may
where that-
start at an initial funding that's
Yeah.
almost like seed money, and then the
Yes.
project
Right.
can take the
Right.
shape that you and the community want it to take down the line
Agreed.
too.
okay, that's good enough.
But we'll then, at the next Board of Mayor and Alderman, have 3 resolutions. Okay. All right. Item number 9, consideration of Resolution 2010-35, authorizing adoption of the manual for the septic certification inspection program. You all have this in your package. We've had some discussion on it, and we've got some more available.
We did bring this back
Do we have
to
a
facilitate some more
presentation?
discussion. We do have a little bit of a presentation for you. This is on your voting agenda tonight as well, but let me just say, there's not any great rush to approve this tonight if you're not comfortable. We wanted to just
Yeah.
put it on for both so there could be some discussion. And it had been discussed at the previous meeting as well, so we kind of decided to put it on both agendas and give you an opportunity for more discussion. And then, if you choose to vote on it tonight, great. If not, and you want more time, that's fine with us. There is not a deadline or a rush to get this done. We want to make sure you've had time to discuss it and be comfortable with the program and the policies we're establishing.
Thank you, Eric. Based on your discussion at the last meeting, we thought it'd be a good idea to review the concern that was brought up regarding the pumping of the septic tank in conjunction with the inspection program. And as you recall, last year when we had discussion about providing municipal sewer service to some of the neighborhoods, the previous ordinance had indicated that once the sewer was provided, available, that residents would have to connect within 180 days. The decision at that time was made that we'd forego the 180 days, provided the septic systems were inspected every 3 years. Now, miraculously, that 3 years just didn't come up from staff, and that's what we're going to try to share with you this evening. And let me see if I can. Okay. First of all, in your packet that I provided you with, which shows the page of this program, the U.S. EPA, Williamson County Disposal Management, State of South Carolina, Texas Commission, there are multiple agencies that recommend the pumping of septic systems for 3 to 5 years, but there's no magical year or frequency of pumping. We've provided you with a chart that is very consistent with the Tennessee regulations and with Williamson County, and it's really based on the tank size and number of occupants in a house. Now, this chart is in your packet, but really what it looks like is different households, and it's a scale based on the number of bedrooms, people, as well as how often it should be pumped. And when we analyze that data, look at the demographics of our community, and it's a very cursory review. There's not too many bedroom houses with 5 to 6 occupants. Not many 4 or 5 bedroom houses that consist of only 1 or 2 occupants. Many of the houses in the city of Franklin consist of 3 to 5 bedrooms, and in most cases a family unit consists of at least 3 people. So thereby we've come up with the recommendation for 3 years. Certainly, if you'd like us to go back and change the ordinance that was adopted last year and have a frequency of inspection 4 years or 5 years or more, we urge you to put some type of time frame on that. What we also recommend is not to have an inspection program, because as we brought up around that time last year, there were a couple homes that already had standing sewage on their property. It's too late.
Yeah.
If our charge is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the community, we should have a periodic inspection program that requires a site visit and an internal tank inspection to make sure that the system is operating and the tank is operating. Again, there's many factors: the number of occupants, the frequency that a family does wash and use certain detergents that break down the functionality of a septic tank. There's no magical number. But what we are saying here is that it is vitally important that septic systems are operating and they don't get to a point where sewage is standing on the ground. And fortunately, we have the capacity, our water utility, to provide the ultimate service as a municipal sanitary sewer service.
I think,
Is it my turn?
I think the overarching goal for requiring the tying on to the sanitary sewer system was public health and protection of groundwater and surface waters. In accommodating, financial hardships and things of that nature, going back to, kind of stepping away from that requirement and going to the requirement of tying on only when your septic fails. Again, that overarching goal is human health and protection of groundwater and surface water. This is simply a means to ensure that we are doing that. So that's really all I have to add.
I just have one personal experience. I probably lived in a house that I know had a septic system here in the city of Franklin for 15 years. We did have a problem one time because for about 2 months, I had 2 children that were in diapers at the same time. And that was back before you did the disposable diapers. So you're washing all the time. That is the only time that we ever had problems with the septic tank. But as I say, I know it does happen, but that was once in 15 years, and thank heaven it didn't last very long. Even after we got it fixed, I didn't have to worry about it again.
Margaret?
According to this chart, is this if one person lives in the house and the septic tank is in working order, the frequency of pumping is much less than 3 years. So would that person still need to pump every 3 years?
Yep, based on this. It would.
One of the benefits of the internet is that there's many communities that have dealt with this issue before and had the same discussions as yourselves. And it is difficult to take a look at the household at a particular point in time and have an effective, efficient inspection program based on who's living there today or at the time we do the inspections. We're trying to set up a program that's efficient, cost-effective, that provides those periodic inspections. And as we've demonstrated with the little information we provided this evening, but also if you check some other communities that are dealing with the same issue, that 3 to 5 year period is across the board for all the septic systems.
Okay, the reason I'm asking that is because many of the areas that have the septic systems are in the older areas. Maybe not right downtown, but in the older areas surrounding town. And those people are getting older, and they don't have the little children, a lot of them. And 3 years seems pretty often for them to have to pump when there's just one person living. Either they're dying, or for some reason there might be just one person there, or maybe two people, and they're older and they don't use it as much. So I have a question about the 3 years. Why not the 5 years?
But partially, and also because they've probably been in that house a long time, that system is much older too than
Well, we don't know
you
that for
see.
sure.
Well,
They might have had it replaced, they may have it pumped every so often, we don't know that.
I think
well,
And
no, but
everybody's
the
gonna be
system is still, and you're not, all you're doing is pumping the tank out. See, there's a tank,
Right.
and then there's field line that drop from that,
$300.
and the liquids, when it gets to a certain level, it goes out into those field lines and into the soil and perks and dissipates. So you're not doing anything to the field lines. Usually when you have a problem, it's because those field lines cease to function. And that's when it
But then you
backs up.
see that. You can see that.
Well-
Here's,
Not
well,
always.
most of the time. Okay, here's a question I've got. I actually had a problem with this last time. I just can't do this 3 years with $200 to $300 worth for people, because, Margaret, you gave me a great example there. Number one, if we had them pay for an inspection and we went out and did a surface inspection, would that be good enough to find out if there's a problem? Number two, if we're going to do this at all, I would say it has to be about 5 years. I wouldn't want to do this every 2 to 3 years. But I'm also wondering about the surface inspection. What does that really tell us? Does that really show us, if there's a problem? And then the other thing is, cannot these people hire their own people to come in and pump the tank? I mean, why would we be doing that? And then
We don't
have-
pump the tank.
We're not doing that, right?
No, that's just the cost it costs them to go to a contractor to do that.
Now, also, would be requiring the city to go out and do the inspection, the surface inspection? Or can they have that inspection and submit a certificate with a license?
One of the reasons to provide that surface inspection, if there is liquids on top of the ground,
Sure.
it's too late. Hopefully the residents, and we don't have the situations as the ones that have come up previously. But it's also an opportunity for us to share with the residents what proper maintenance is. I mean, we're not making this up, whether it's 3 to 5 years. If you believe it's a cost burden, that's a decision you can make, but this is based on professional best practices. It's ultimately your choice. What we're saying is that without providing a surface inspection, for us to work with the county to document the location of the tank and the septic field, together with a tank inspection, which requires pumping by a licensed firm, well, we would advocate not even do a program, because hopefully the residents can see when the sewage is on the ground. We're trying to be more proactive to look at the tank, make sure it's working, make sure that the solids are being disintegrated, and also being out on the site so we know exactly where everything is should a problem arise.
But we're going to do that for people that are within so many feet, 200 feet, is it, of our sewer? But then
Right.
the other people outside that are not required to do this? So I
Well, you're giving
It's-
the
it's
benefit of these
inconsistent.
people who are 200 feet within your sewer lines, you've extended
Right.
the ability to stay on septic, which helps them avoid a cost of several $1,000s to hook onto the sewer system.
Gives them
So
time
you
to
are giving a cost deferral option to these folks who didn't have that before.
yeah, so they can save
But the
money.
trade-off for that is for you to say, you still need to show us at some regular basis that your system is working and is
Absolutely.
safe.
I don't have a problem.
And so, and the only way for us really to do that and to truly inspect it is to pump the tank and look at it.
I don't have a problem with that. I just probably have a problem requiring that every 3 years.
Let me, I think we may have I don't know, is anyone interested in voting on this tonight, or do you think we need a little bit more discussion? It is on tonight's agenda, so, because we've got about 10 more items that we really need to kind of talk about tonight, so we might be able
I
to talk.
think it needs more discussion and
Okay.
certainly
I
from a
kind of think
timeframe.
so, too.
Okay.
What other information do we need to be able to make a decision?
Kind of the same information we needed to talk about that loop road.
We need time to
Send you
find
one
those.
Can I throw that back to you, like you did to us? I think we're just not ready to vote on this at the moment, and I would like to hear from, one is I think we need to think about it, but I think there needs to be more discussion about it, quite frankly.
Let's send our questions in as well,
So-
because we're going to have some.
Well, I don't have any questions, I just,
Do you want it back on a work
Let's take it
session
back
for
to the work
discussion?
session.
I think it needs to go back to the work
Yeah.
session.
I've got a couple
So
more
we'll-
questions I'll send you.
so we will, if someone would this afternoon, this evening, defer that back to the work session next week. Item number 10. Consideration of Resolution 2010-30, resolution establishes a sustainable building policy for our Franklin Municipal Building. You know, we could move this one.
Maybe take a little bit more discussion.
Is that okay?
Poor Andrew, smile at the camera for you.
That's fine if you want to move to another
It's
time.
not really to talk about this because there could be financial.
I agree, so I'd like to defer it to the next work session.
I didn't, I like kind of.
Way to go, Andrew. Hey, next time wear a tie.
That was a very good presentation.
Otherwise, we would listen to you tonight if you'd had a time.
That's right.
That's cold. That's very cold.
Bless his heart. We didn't really mean that, Andy. Yeah, we're just checking. Item number 11, consideration of resolution 2010-45, detailed resolution for recovery zone bonds.
This is really kind of a final cleanup resolution that puts all the pieces together for our ability to pursue the additional Super Build America bonds. We've really taken action previously, but Bond Council advised us to summarize it all in one, that this would be cleaner for us to do, and that's why we've pulled this together, that provides for the additional $10 million of Super Buy America bond capacity that we were able to get through the Economic and Community Development Department. So this just puts that in place for us to pursue that, and we'd like to get that voted on tonight as well, if we could.
Is this just for city expenditures on Hillsborough?
Yes.
In other words, it's not,
It's all city project related in the
I know.
recovery zone.
but it's not like property owners can apply as a piece
No.
of it? That's
This would only be for our project.
And so, really, we just sold 44 million in bonds, so that other 4 million plus the extra 10 is what we're
Yes.
talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Item number 12, consideration of resolution 2010-44, resolution to approve the award of the Environmental Protection Agency congressionally mandated projects grant. Blah, 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 and designating the city engineer as the city's authorizing representative. That's you, David.
That's me. This is for the Liberty Creek detention quality facility that we have planned and designed and have a grant through EPA that is congressionally mandated, in that we went to our congressional representatives and they mandated that EPA gives us the money. So that's the reason it's called that. We do need to have this approved tonight. Tonight is the deadline for getting an approval on it before we could actually lose it. They only gave us 21 days to do it, and we couldn't get it to you at the last meeting, so.
Great, okay. Any questions? I would.
Is this the project where they reduced it a little bit because we didn't use it previously?
They reduced it by a couple of $1,000s. Originally, this grant was going to go for some Watson Branch work. We could not identify a good project that would be beneficial, so we got it transferred to Liberty Creek, yes.
But this was second priority, wasn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes,
so,
yes.
and needed.
Okay, if without objection, I would like to move item 13 to the next work session if we can. Just for the sake of time.
Right.
The reason to move it.
Is that all right? Yeah. 'Cause I think we need a little discussion on that.
Oh, yeah.
Is that, but we don't have to make a decision there.
Okay.
We don't need to
Item number
explain that.
14, consideration of agreement for special detail police officer services. We got the full battalion here.
We got the whole crew here. One of the things we've looked at over the last year is just having a little more structure related to the special detail work that our police officers do for businesses and community organizations and how that works, as well as providing some measure of getting a small measure of repayment to the city for support it provides in terms of equipment and materials and uniforms, et cetera, all the things we provide to our officers that are part of providing those services to the organizations. So this both provides you with a policy and how the process works, as well as a base or draft kind of standard agreement in terms of what the organizations that we work with would enter into. And David and Chief Moore have worked this up over time along with our law department.
Do we have a policy now?
We have a practice. We do not have the current policy currently. Historically, we've had the same practice in place for a number of years.
Have we approached potential private entities? Is this going to be an obstruction for them to use us, or what kind of feedback are you getting?
We did get feedback from vendors before we looked at the dollar amount. Almost unanimously, they were on board with the $5 an hour surcharge. They recognized that it gave them some additional legal protection, and they saw it as a good investment. We had one or two vendors who said that since they had not budgeted for that additional amount in this current year, that they'd have to look at whether they could afford to continue it throughout the calendar year.
The use of city equipment then has been the practice in the past, but so we've always had the liability of that, even if it's non-city. So nothing has to change as far as our risk or anything like that?
No, this has passed muster with risk management team help, etc.
We've run this by every
now that
parties.
I mean,
This helps us.
We're about to formalize this. We're already passed.
Okay, thank you, guys. Item number 15, consideration of a one-time benefit of 2 personal days for full-time employees as of July 1, 2010, to be taken on before June 30, 2011.
This is something we provided employees last year in lieu of being able to give them a pay raise. We did it last year. I'd suggest we do it again this year because we're not doing a pay increase until mid-year. And, you know, we've had a lot of additional things our folks have dealt with over the last year. So I just think it'd be an appropriate step for us to go ahead and grant this again this year as, again, a one-time thing that we provide for them. They have to use it or they lose it. We really see there being very minimal true direct cost to the city in doing it. We're still able to schedule in manners that minimize any overtime impact in doing it, and it was much appreciated by our employees in this last year, and it's something we can do to help recognize their efforts.
And we've done two days for this year.
We did 2 days during this year, and I'd suggest we do it again this fiscal year.
But no pay increase.
Yeah.
Last year, there was
Last
no pay.
year, but they're
Last
talking
year was
about a
none.
pay.
But now they're talking about a pay increase.
We're talking about 2%
And 2 days.
In January.
Well, that's fine. But if you go back and you'll look, you'll see also that several municipalities are doing bonuses, not pay increases.
Right, which
We
is
have
something to think
discussed the pay increase thing, and we've agreed to that in lieu of the bonus. Certainly, the pay increase costs the taxpayer more than does the bonus.
Absolutely.
So, if it was a one-time thing last year, apparently it's a two-time thing this year.
Well, I think it ought to be left open for whenever we need it, and I certainly think they deserve it.
We can always do this. There's no,
That's right.
I think
We're
the
not
point of the
arguing whether
matter
they
is
just, they
that, the question just is this appropriate for this year or not? I mean, we are giving, and you're absolutely right, there's a big difference between a bonus and a pay raise. And because it goes in forever, and it adds to retirement and all those kind of good things. And there's a lot of municipalities, including the state, I think, that are going to give bonuses rather than pay raises, but.
State employees have not gotten pay raises for the last 2 years.
Yes, I know that. So.
And by the
And
time
we're not this year either.
by the time we get to our 2% cost of living, it will have been 30 months between any pay adjustments for our employees. So we have stretched that. This is a relatively low-cost way to show some additional appreciation for those efforts and for having to go without that, and time can serve as a nice benefit to our employees. So I would suggest we do it just for this year. Yes, we did do it last year, but it's a two-time, one-time thing, I guess we'd call it.
And I think we need to, if we vote to do this, we need to make it perfectly clear that this is not going to happen every year, and that, it's not a program that we're going to, hadn't become an ordinance or a resolution.
Well, I think that one thing you can look at is what happened a month ago. And the unusual amount of time that employees put in overtime, effort, and all of that. I think, I don't have a problem with being rewarded for that. Okay. I mean, we've set out and said, we've given them verbal recognition and verbal praise.
Yeah.
I think that can go along with that.
The flood response is definitely one of the things that weighs in my mind and bring this forward to you.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
Okay, item number 16, consideration of cost of living adjustment for retirees. This was deferred from 5/25.
We have, several years ago, in 2006, the board voted to look at the cost of living every year for the retirees. It's not mandatory, but I know last year we gave it to the retirees, even though the employees did not get it, and we are again basing it on the CPI, less food and energy, which equates to 0.923% increase over last year, and we would recommend that we give 1% to the, well, we're asking this committee to give 1%.
You're recommending. That's good.
Actually, we are recommending. Staff is recommending that we give a 1% increase for all retirees, and that will equate to about $17,000 for the year.
Pension also.
Well, actually, it didn't. I brought it up, and he said it was on here this time.
I've seen it before, so.
Yeah, I brought it up at the last meeting, and he said it was on here.
You're not voting on the policy, you're just voting on the one time, the 1 year. This comes to you every year. We did provide you with sort of the framework.
Each year.
But we are going to bring a
you do it each
policy
year.
But we'd have to come back to
This
each
is
year.
this is the framework that has been used the last few years, and it's consistent with what TCRS typically does.
In 2006, we implemented this. We brought it forward and asked, when we made some other changes to the plan, we brought it forward and put it into the policy that every year we will bring it to this board for consideration. And this is consistent with what TCRS
Here it
does.
says cost of living adjustments shall be made effective July 1st of each year based, okay.
Well,
But
Based
that's
on
if you
your
gonna
approve
come
it,
back.
if you
upon
approve
our-
it,
That's
yes.
fine. It's on you.
Any comments?
The only other comment, we need to, as rapidly and quickly as possible, we need to
That's right.
resolve
That's right.
the pension and retirement and
Right.
trust issues that we've got.
Yes, we do.
Absolutely.
Okay, item number 17, we're pulling. Item number 18, acknowledgement of amendment to agreement for the purchase of transit services between the Franklin Transit Authority and the Transportation Management Association Group. I think that's just acknowledging
Yeah.
that agreement. Is that not
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, yes, sir.
Do we have to talk about this?
You do not.
Does anybody-
time it'll be before you.
Does anybody have any questions on that issue? Lovely to see you, ladies.
Thank you. We have one more, I think.
Okay.
You did a nice
Item
job.
number 19, consideration of interlocal agreement with Williamson County for General Sessions Court jurisdiction to try and dispose of Franklin municipal ordinance violations.
All right. I do have an update to this, which I'll go ahead and pass around. This came about, our city court had found out that at least one of the general sessions judges over at the county courthouse was refusing to hear our municipal ordinance violations. And the way this would come up is, a good blanket example is, say someone was pulled over for an ordinance violation such as a U-turn, and say, sitting right next to them was a big thing of cocaine or something. Well, the cocaine obviously would be the state violation, but the U-turn would be the ordinance violation. So this, at least, as I said, at least one of the judges was hearing only the state and sending the ordinance back. And this can kind of create a little bit of double jeopardy situation. Well, the state code allows for general sessions judges to have jurisdiction over municipal code violations, and it says that cities may have interlocal agreements with counties for this to be done. So although it's provided by state law, these judges have said that they would feel more comfortable, and in fact, this is the only way that they will hear our code violations, is if we have this interlocal agreement.
Have you spoken to all this? It says right here, we discussed this with one of the general sessions judges.
Yes, well, actually,
Since then-
their county, the county attorney has been discussing it with the judges.
So you've been working this out with the county attorney?
Yes, yes, sir.
a revised.
Yes.
Okay.
Revised, and we revised it again.
Okay.
And this is what they need.
Yeah, an updated.
So that they'll hear
That gets
ours.
in the.
Yes, when they are in conjunction with state violations, that's the,
But there's still no guarantee that that individual judge still will hear these.
no, she is, well, she has said that,
Oh.
he or she
Oh, wow.
has said that they would be okay with that.
Okay.
I'm glad I asked if you had spoken to everyone of them.
Item number 20,
Both of them.
consideration of ordinance 2010-39, an ordinance to rezone 106.15 acres from estate residential to civic and institutional for property located at 111 Daniel McMahon Lane. I need to say for the record that I am a member of this church and also the chair of the building committee of this church.
Well,
All right.
we're in the room now, are we?
Oh, is Ann going to speak on?
Uh-oh, we've got it ugly.
And you are too.
I've been in the doors of that church.
You can expect a call. I was saying that on Sunday, I was asked if I'd changed my church membership since I had been there for a while. Anyway, I want everyone to know that, and
So am I.
And I guess we'll just hear from your Ann.
We don't have quorum.
and let it be known, you can vote on this. You
Absolutely.
just need to notify, you have done what you needed to do.
Absolutely, vote.
Now, this is not voting right now, though.
No,
We're just
but,
discussing.
and when it
for
comes
more
to
money.
vote, we will make sure everybody knows the same thing.
And this is a simple rezoning from estate residential to civic and institutional. There were no problems with it at the Plan Commission. It came out of Plan Commission with a recommendation of 8-0. It is, there are no conditions on the rezoning. It is pretty straightforward.
Any questions? And item number 21 is approving the concept plan
Yes.
for the same piece of property.
Yes, and this is the same piece of property. This is the beginning of the process. It's the concept plan. There is one item regarding a greenway that will be held off until regulating plan, and both staff and the applicant have agreed to that. Most of the other conditions are fairly standard conditions that the applicant has agreed to. And that, again, was Plan Commission 8-0.
Thank you, Kathy. Item number 22,
got this
consideration
one,
of
too.
ordinance, oh, what?
She's got this one, too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All of them.
Consideration of ordinance 2010-40, an ordinance to amend section 14-202 of the Franklin Municipal Code relative to the applications, permits, inspections, and fees for inspection and re-inspections for the planning review process.
Okay. And this item is something that staff wanted to bring forward. In 2009, staff did a comparison of our fees with other communities, of quality communities, and what we found is that we are far below other communities, including Murfreesboro and Smyrna, in terms of our staff fees. What we're asking for is a simple, we want to be able to cover more of the fees that we generate. As you know, our process is fairly complex. We're not currently getting anywhere close to covering the fees. That is particularly true in the BZA situation, where it's only $50 to file a request to be heard. And as you know, it's an hour to 2 hour meeting. That board is paid, as well as staff, plus we have an attorney there. That doesn't even begin to cover. But many of the other fees also don't cover that staff time that's taken and needed to go through the process. So we're asking just for this fairly minimal increase. Now, we did compare with some communities that have very high fees and that type of thing, and we're not asking for anything near that. We're asking to be more in line with the Murfreesboro and the Smyrnas in terms of our fees. We did look at some of the other fees and impact fees, but again, those are construction fees. These are fees that are just staff time, and if they're not being paid by the applicant, then they're being paid out of the general fund.
The moral of this is do not develop in Castle Rock, Colorado.
Yes.
It's a lovely place.
Being very lenient in your request, because this is a desirable place to be.
Yes. And I think that as the years go by, we will look at this from time to time. You know, this isn't our probably last request, but this is a request that is taking into consideration that we don't want to hit the developers all at once with big fees. On the other hand, we also want to start the process of covering our staff time.
So these new fees that you put in here, how do they compare now to Murfreesboro?
They are coming much closer. In some cases, we're even with Murfreesboro. In other cases, we're still behind Murfreesboro. In some cases, we're a little bit above. So they're really kind of evening out.
And I ran the numbers on a couple just projects, and I think it's important that we start to recover costs and that the developer pays for that. But also, we're also in a tough economic condition as well, and so we don't want to say right now, let's slam you. And this really, you take a 50,000 square foot shopping center, I did it, and while it costs a little bit of money, it's certainly not going to make or break the project in any form or fashion. The developer wouldn't, I mean, they may complain about it, but it's not going to make a big difference, and it does help supplement the cost. So being a developer, I would say this, at this point in time, for the first juncture, is a reasonable request.
Definitely move forward.
Okay, thank you again. Item number 23, consideration of ordinance 2010-51, an ordinance to approve a special permit for Gallery 202 for the purpose of operating an art gallery used as a private recreational facility on .39 acres located at 202 2nd Avenue South.
Yes, and again, this came out of Plan Commission with an 8-0 vote. For some reason, art galleries are considered recreational facilities. This is simply a art gallery where, for the most part, she will be displaying her art, but that will be for sale, and so it has to have this zoning designation.
All right, item number 24, Interplanning Commission Review, 3105 Boyd Mill Pike.
Yes. And this came out again as an 8-0 vote. We had no comments from the Plan Commission, nor did we have comments from staff regarding this item.
Item number 25, Review South Hall Heights.
The same kind of situation, again, 8-0, no comments from the Plan Commission, nor any comments from staff.
And item number 26 is the event permit for the Jazz Festival. And they're not even here, but, so we're good. They've got it set up. I'd like to reconvene as quickly as we can, as soon as they reset up here for the Bolo meeting.
They have to reconfigure this.